everyone, we are back, this time with an actual very specific sample library review. We're talking about World Suite 2 by UVI. I thought it was very brave of them to send me an NFR considering my previous reviews. So they got balls at UVI. So I'll just jump right into it. It's a massive library, first of all. It has, I think, 369 instruments, 40 gigabytes worth of samples, and all that for, on average, $300 or less if it's on sale. It also has over 10,000 loops in it, but you all know what I think about that. Now, at first, when I downloaded the library, I thought, wow, 40 gigabytes, that's a lot. But then I thought about the amount of instruments in it, and I thought, well, Cineperc has, I think, over 100 gigabytes, and that's just a percussion library, or something like Cinematic Studio Strings, which is just a string library, has, I think, 35 to 40 gigabytes worth of samples. So then I was like, considering the amount of instruments, it's actually not a very heavy sample load. So I was kind of going into it with this, caution in my mind that this is not a lot of samples considering how many instruments it is. And so playing through this library for the first time, I thought it's a bit of a mixed bag. And so I did more research on the library. And the reason it's a mixed bag is because they started this a long time ago. So some of these instruments are super old, and it shows. And some instruments are new, and that shows too. So there are some instruments in here that I think are absolutely brilliant, and it's a lot of instruments that are actually really, really great, and I will actually add them to my template and they will stay there. And then there were other instruments where I was like, how is this in here as well? It's not nearly on par with these absolutely great instruments. But yeah, so what I found out is it's because of the different ages of the instruments and when they were made. A lot of these aren't very deep sampled. I think also a lot of these instruments can't be deep sampled because a lot of them have limited dynamic ranges and limited, velocities, limited playing techniques and such. But so the reason I wrote a demo was because I can only judge a library by actually using it in a piece, not just by playing through patches and judging based on that. I actually wanted to use the library, pick all the instruments that I really liked, and just put them in a piece of music. And it doesn't show. It doesn't show as much that, there are some lacking velocities or something, or that it's not quite as deep sampled as some other libraries. And it's super light on the system, which I actually really like. And yeah, once you put EQ on it and a proper reverb and you pan things right, or you put, some nice effects on it, it blends very beautifully. So what I thought was going to be a problem actually didn't turn out to be a problem when writing with the library. Personally, I would have preferred them focusing on fewer instruments but sampling them a bit deeper, but that's just kind of my opinion. I also initially thought it's a very dry library. The moment you take the reverb off in the UVI player, it sounds like these were recorded in an ISO booth. And I also initially thought, oh man, I wish they had recorded this in a proper room. But actually, usually the way you use ethnics are that you would put, special effects on them. Or, I really enjoyed putting, some sound toy stuff on them or some Valhalla shimmer. And it actually works better that way because you don't have a pre-recorded room on the samples. So again, something that I was hesitant about at first, and then when I actually used it, it turned out to be an actual advantage. It took a little moment to get used to the UVI engine. I had used it before during my time at Cinesamples because we released Randy's Celeste for the UVI player as well. But I didn't remember it quite as well. So it took a moment, but it's fairly intuitive. It's a player and it works, which should go without saying, but since every library developer between here and the moon is coming out with their own player, I feel like it needs to be emphasized that this player works flawlessly. I haven't experienced any bugs or any delays or, it's not been taxing on my system or anything. So it's good, it works, and it doesn't look like a product that was developed before I was conceived. So Beware of moving the sound banks, by the way. After I had installed it, I wanted to move the sound banks away from my system drive, and I couldn't find them for a long time. I'm on PC, and that's because it's a hidden file. So if you want to do that, be sure to show hidden files, and then you will find the sound banks in the recommended location. But yeah, other than that, the player is very intuitive. The routing is intuitive. It comes with a lot of controls right there in the interface, which I like, and it looks very clean. It's very understandable. Now, what I specifically like about this library is that it covers every continent. Usually when you have libraries that do ethnics or world instruments, whatever you want to call them, they only cover basically the Far East and the Middle East, and they leave out everything else. And in this library, they actually focused on every continent. So you also have instruments from European folklore and, from South America and from Africa and from Australia. So they didn't just focus on Far East and Middle East. They just, you have all kinds of gypsy instruments in here. It's just all very interesting stuff that I've never heard of. Every other instrument I was clicking on was just new to me, which is very interesting for a composer, of course. But also when I use other ethnic libraries and it's, I use an erhu or a duduk, the problem is that these are tied to very, very specific regions, and there's the immediate association in the audience, where these instruments belong. But they actually sampled a lot of instruments that are folksy. So you can use them for pretty much anything as an added flavor without people immediately going, oh yeah, that instrument belongs there in that region of the world. So they're more versatile in that way. I could also imagine this being incredibly useful for video games, for example, to create specific sound worlds that you don't want to play specifically in a particular region. The library also comes with a really easy search function, and what I really like is that you can search by different categories. So you can search by region, but you can also search the instruments by type, which I've always missed in other libraries. Because say I'm looking for something specific, like a plucked string instrument, then I really just want to see those instruments. But if I can only search by region, then I have to go through every region, by itself and then find those particular instruments. Here you can actually go, I'm looking for XYZ, and then just look for those particular instruments from any region, really. The library looks very pretty. I mean, it's not important to me, but if it's important to you, by all means, it looks very gorgeous. Like any ethnic library, it uses a lot of key switches, which I'm not a fan of, but I honestly don't have a better idea. Because how else would you do it, really? So in terms of practicality, I never found key switches to be, the most useful, but I can't really complain if I don't have a better solution for it. I don't really have a suggestion on how to do this, in any more practical way. So yeah, this library also heavily relies on you using key switches. I think the strongest sections in this are definitely the pitched percussion, love it, and the plucked strings. Those are definitely my favorites. And then there are some really great woodwinds in this, and there's some really great percussion, unpitched percussion. There are also some vocals in this that I didn't find quite as useful, but I think other people might find them useful. It's just personal preference. And there are some accordion type instruments in this that I also liked. I just didn't use them in my demo because it didn't fit in. And there are some bowed strings. I think those are probably the ones that leave the most to be desired. Because I think bowed strings just really need to be deep sampled, and that's just not what this library has done. So let me show you the instruments that I've actually used in my demo so that you can actually hear them separated out. The ones you're gonna see in the demo are basically the ones I like the most. I didn't use all of them because I didn't find a spot for all of them, but you can kind of get the idea. There are other walkthroughs where composers actually play through every patch for hours and hours. So if you really want to get a more in-depth look of people just playing through stuff, just look for those other reviews on this. But so in conclusion, I would say this library is roughly a third excellent, a third average, and a third meh. But is it worth it for the price? I would say yes. Just to give you a comparison, what I've used before is East-West, and I'm still going to use a little bit of that to fill in the gaps. But I'm trying to move away from, the Play engine. So I'm very glad this library exists. But just to give you a comparison, for East-West, you would have to spend a lot more money to get the same instruments, because yes, you have something like Silk, but that only covers instruments from the Silk Road. You have Ra, you have the Gypsy series, you have the Voices of Passion. So you would actually have to buy like 5 East-West products to get the same instruments that you have in this library, which is just one product. And it's the price of, maybe 1 or 2 East-West libraries. There's also Phoenix, which I haven't played yet. I'm kind of curious to play with it. But Phoenix, of course, also only covers Far Eastern instruments. So you do not get the same amount of instruments, even though they might be, more deep sampled. You only get, a tiny, tiny fraction of the instruments. And it costs 500 euros, which is, I think, roughly $600 currently. So it costs pretty much twice as much as the World Suite when it's not on sale. But you only get a tiny, tiny fraction of the actual instruments. So yeah, I would say in terms of what you get for the price, this is probably the best bang for the buck on the market currently. But yeah, be aware that it does require a little bit of, tweaking and work to make it sound the way you want it to sound. And it's a very mixed bag because, some instruments are old, some were just recently added. So, I'm glad they're expanding the library. I'm glad they put in new stuff over time. But yeah, it just makes for a mixed bag. So just be aware of that when you get the library.